Thank you, Brother Charles. Thank y'all for the privilege of me being able to stand up here tonight and we study God's Word together. And, you were talking about Israel earlier. You just can't understand people's logic sometimes because there is no logic. The world is going crazy. You just look around and see, and when you can identify to whatever you want to be, people ain't wired right. Something just don't make no sense. Here's a perfect example. I went and gave blood at Red Cross, and when I sat down, the lady asked me, "Are you a male?" And I said, "Can you not tell?" And she said, "Well, you have to answer." She said, "You have to answer, and we have to write it down." I said, "Okay, yes, I'm a male." She said, "What race are you?" And I said, "Okay." I said, "You know what? Let's back up. We're going to go a different route." I said, "Let's start all over. Ask me the first question again." She said, "Are you a male?" I said, "No, I'm a female." She said, "Well, that's what I'll put down." I said, "Put it down." So she marked it. She said, "What race are you?" I said, "I'm black." She said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah. Can't you tell?" She said, "Okay." And the man standing behind her, he just laughed his head off, and we had a good time. But as far as the Red Cross is concerned, Walter James Russell III is a black female. But what my point is that you shouldn't have to ask those questions. It makes no sense. And if you was to battle that, then you become the oddity of everyone else. In other words, you are the one that has the problem, when it makes no logical sense to have to ask those questions. But what is the world coming to? So as a way of introduction, I like to say that we serve a merciful, compassionate, loving God. And if anyone can't see that, then there's nothing I know to be able to change their mind. You look around and you see what we got, you see where we came from, you see what He's created, and just that alone should be able to tell you what a loving, merciful God that we serve. And people call it a religion sometimes. I don't call it that. I call it a way of life. It's a way of life. It's not a religion. We're not Baptist. We're not Presbyterian. We're not all these different denominations. We are Bible believers with a relationship with Christ. That's how I identify with that. You don't have to ask me how I identify with that. To me, it's just common sense that is what it is. And if you think anything any different, then you probably need to go back and study your Bible, if you're studying it at all. We're going to be talking about obedience. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago in our Sunday school class, and I loved it so much that I wanted to do it again. The act of obedience. You know how hard it is to be obedient? I mean, it is tough to be obedient. And all the way from the time you're born to the age we're at now, we're having to be obedient with everything. Your parents telling you what you need to do. Sometimes they don't tell you why. They just say, "This is what you do." And if you don't do it, there's consequences. You don't know why. You just say, "Yes, sir," or "Yes, ma'am." And then you get to school, and then you got teachers telling you what you should do. All right? You get through that, if you make it, and I barely did, but you get through that, and then you get a job. And then when you get that, you got those people telling you what you should do or how to do it. And so throughout our lives, not even talking biblically speaking yet, but just throughout our lives, we are to be obedient. We have things to follow, so we have to be obedient. And so that's what I wanted to talk about is obedience. And we're going to be in the book of Mark, chapter 14. That's where we're going to be, starting with verse 32. And I'll give you a second to get there. But obedience, not only do we have just our normal way of life, of how we react to being obedient, we also have the sinful flesh that stops us from wanting to be obedient. You know as well as I do that if you want to justify something in your mind to do something that you shouldn't do, you can justify it in your mind if you think about it hard enough. You know, well, it ain't going to be that bad. And really, if I do it this way, this is how it should go. And it shouldn't be that big of a deal. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. But we know when we're acting out and being disobedient, we know what we're doing when we're doing it. And when we're manipulating and working behind the scenes, we know what we're doing when we're doing that. And here's a story. I remember one time that a friend of mine, when he turned 16 years old, he turned 16 before me, and we were going to Newnan High School. And I was talking to him we didn't have cell phones back then, so, you know, he had the phone with a long cord. So I was talking to him on that, and he said, Rusty, don't even try to talk me out of skipping school. I'm not skipping school in the morning. First day that he drives to school now, he wasn't there 5 minutes, and I done talked him in till we skipping school. Now, we wasn't doing anything wrong in my mind. We just wanted to go fishing instead of going to school. So we went fishing. And we caught a lot of fish, had a great time that day, just wearing them out. I had no thought in my mind that I was doing anything wrong. I said, man, we're just fishing. That's all we're doing. I get through with all that. I get home, and guess what? He doesn't get caught, but I do. Because my mom stayed with good relationships with everybody at the school because she knew I was going to be into things doing what I ought not do. So as soon as I wasn't there, guess what? They called her. And when I got home, she already knew that and did he get in trouble? No, but that's okay because I'm the one that talked him into it. And I took the consequences. Mama gave me a good tongue lashing, but when Daddy got home, it was a different kind of lashing I got. So sometimes when we're not obedient, you know, we have to deal with the consequences. So in Mark chapter 14, starting in verse 32, then they came to a place named Gethsemane, and he told his disciples, sit here while I pray. He took Peter, James, John with him, and he began to deeply distressed and troubled. So here, let's stop here for a moment. He took Peter, James, and John. Now, we all have an inner circle that we confide to and a couple of friends that we can trust. And all the way through high school up to adulthood to where we're at now in life, we have that inner circle that we talk to. Well, Jesus had that inner circle too. And it was Peter, James, and John. That's why he didn't bring the rest of the disciples. He brought Peter, James, and John. That was his inner circle. And the reason he had those three with him is because if you remember, Peter was always the one that was going to take care of business no matter what. He was the first one that was going to jump up and take care of business. And the best way I could equate him was I was on a school bus one time, 6th grade. Had a bully, was bullying me on a school bus. Well, there's a friend of mine that lived down the road from him. They called him Doodlebug. That was his nickname, Doodlebug. Real name was Garvin Kelly. Won't never forget it. And that guy was saying what he was going to do to me when we got off the school bus. So, of course, I was thinking, now, what am I going to do? And was I scared? Absolutely, I was scared. And so we get off the school bus. Well, old Doodlebug, I didn't know, was sitting back there hearing all this. He was a couple of years older than us. And Doodlebug never let nobody mess with me. Like if Doodlebug was around, wasn't nobody going to mess with Rusty. Doodlebug's going to take care of business. So we get off the school bus. We get over there in the schoolyard somewhere where teachers can't see. And here comes this guy. Here he comes, coming over there to do whatever he was going to do to me. He didn't get as far as from here to that guitar, and all of a sudden Doodlebug snatched him up. And that was the end of him. And after that, I never had to hear another word out of that guy's mouth. But that was Peter. Peter was the same way. So Jesus had him close. Now, did Peter always do what he's supposed to do? No. But that's where free will comes in. Because Christ wants us to be obedient. And he doesn't want to make us do it. He wants us to do it on our own. And when we do it on our own, it brings him joy. And then on top of that, if you remember your kids growing up, and as they're getting older, You can see what they're going to do, what they're going to get into, but you can tell them that all day long, and they're not going to listen. And you have to sit back and let them go through it. Even though you already know the outcome, Jesus is the same way. He already knows the outcome. He's going to let us go on through it. If we decide we're going to go that route and be disobedient, okay, go ahead. He's going to let us do it. But that was his inner circle. And you got James and John. And James and John always said, we're with you to the end. You go back and study, James and John is, we're going to be with you, Christ. No matter what, we with you. You ever been in a situation where you had somebody say, we with you to the end, and then you get to that situation, you look up, and you're the only one standing there. Everybody's gone. What happened? You know, that's happened to me many times. They become ghosts. So you have to be careful who your inner circle is. Even though Christ knows what's going to happen, but he still allows it to happen. And it says that he was deeply distressed and troubled. The reason he was deeply distressed and troubled is because this is right before they're going to come get him and carry him to the cross. This is right before all that begins. And even before that, the last event they had before we get to verse 32 was the Last Supper. Okay? And the Last Supper, you had Peter, James, and John then saying the same thing. You know, we got you. Peter even said then that I will not deny you. But he knew different. Christ knew different. And then he had Judas Iscariot leave to go betray him right then. And so when he says that he's deeply distressed and troubled, he's thinking about all of those things, but he's also thinking about what he's about to go through. So who wouldn't be deeply distressed and troubled? In verse 34, he said to him, I am deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and stay awake. The emotional side, remember, we're talking to God. God is human at that point. And so the same emotions and feelings and thoughts and all those things he's going through, he knows what we go through. So when we get to that point of being disobedient, he knows. That's why he's so merciful with us, because he knows and because he loves us so much. We already know what he did. So let's move down to verse 35. He went a little farther. He fell to the ground. Let's stop there. He didn't crouch down. He fell. Christ fell to the ground. He was showing humility. And sometimes I think we have to do a checkup on ourselves so that we're humble. There's a gentleman that I don't work with him all the time, but on certain projects I have to deal with him. Well, he's so great, he has to tell me how great he is. And about the only way you can handle this guy is you have to tell him how great he is as well. And then that way you can just keep going with the job and you don't have to go through a bunch of drama. Well, my point is let him think whatever he wants to think. But if you're humble, I can tell you he's in his mid-40s, and if he hadn't got it by now, statistics show that he's not going to get it by now. The way he is now is the way he's going to be. And so that's the way he's probably going to be for the rest of his life. But if he were to be obedient and not be so insecure and not be so arrogant about himself, Christ would probably take him much further than where he's at now. And the point is being obedient. I promise you 100%, God has took me further than I ever thought I was going to go. And has put me places I never thought I'd be. And the reason being is because you got to shed that pride and you got to be humble and you got to be obedient. Even when you know you're right, just keep it to yourself. Who cares? As long as you know, that's all that matters, because it's about obedience. And the whole point of us being obedient to Christ is what? To bring glory to him. That's what it's about. that there's nothing else that it's about other than bringing glory to him. So Christ is being humble. He falls to the ground. And he's praying. And he says the hour might pass. He says, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father. So let's stop there. Back. In those days, when you use the word Abba, it was children using that word. So Christ is even humbling himself to be as a little child talking to his Father. That's how humble he is. And even though we see it depicted here, we also know that he's humble because he died for us. Just knowing that is enough. But when you see him even going through the extra steps of what he's doing, it lets you know just how humble he is. He doesn't have an arrogant bone in that human body he's in right now. It's all about humility. Everything is about humility and obedience. It says, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. The cup is not a literal cup. The cup is a symbol. And back in the Old Testament, the cup was referred to as God's wrath and judgment. That's what the cup's referring to. So what Christ is saying is, can we go a different route? Do we have to do it this way? That's what he's saying. He's pleading with his Father, let's go a different route, because he knows what he's about to do. But then look at the next statement. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. And so he's saying, it's what you want, God. And a lot of times that's what we got to think about sometimes, because we let ourselves get in the way. And when we get in the way, we don't get to see that blessing that we would have saw if we was obedient and stepped out of the way and let God talk to us. And when I say talk to us, I'm not talking about say a prayer when we're in trouble and we need them. I'm talking about we're constantly building that relationship with him, because that's what the whole thing's about, is having a relationship with him. And when we talk to him just like I talk to him just like I'm talking to you right now, because I know he knows me. I know he knows my personality. I know he knows what I'm about. And it ain't no sense in me trying to put on any kind of airs about it, because he knows different. So I talk to him just like we're talking right now. And that brings him joy when we come to him in humility and we fall and we just thank him for what he does for us. And when we are obedient, he's going to take us to the next level. I'm not saying a wealth kind of thing. I'm saying in life, in general, when we have that close relationship with Christ, he gets us where we want to be in life. We may not even know where we want to be, but I promise you 100%, he will get us where he wants us, and it will line up with what we want. We may not know it right then. There's been many things in my life, and I know in your life, that when it happened, you couldn't figure out why it happened or how it happened, or even, I don't even like that. I don't want to do that. But then when you look back on it, it may be a week, it may be a month, it may be years. But when you look back on it, you say, the light bulb came on. Now I know why. It's just like planting seeds with people. Sometimes you don't know if the seed's getting planted or not. You have no idea. We may never know, but we're acting out of obedience. And that's what it is about. When we act out of obedience, Christ will reward us with more and more and more. And when I say that, I'm talking about peace inside. You know, when everything's going wrong around you and you can sit there with a smile on your face and you got that peace that passes all understanding, that's Christ and that close relationship that you have with him. Here's a good one. Loving other people. That's a tough one sometimes, because some people are easy to love, but others aren't so easy to love. And sometimes I want to choke somebody, but you can't do that. But it all goes through our minds. Some people just won't say it. I don't mind saying it. I'm going to be honest. It doesn't bother me because I know me and I know my Father knows me. So it doesn't bother me. But we just can't act upon it. But those people that are tough to love, if we act out of obedience and take 4 or 5 good big breaths and think about Christ, then if we're thinking about Christ, it's like giving. If I think I'm giving money to the church, I wouldn't give. But if I'm thinking I'm giving money to my God, to Christ, and then ever how the church handles it, if they handled it wrong, that's on them. I'm doing it out of my act of obedience, so I'm giving it to him. Same way with loving others when you run across somebody that's tough to love. Now we'll move down to verse 37. Then he came and found them sleeping. He said to Peter, Simon, are you sleeping? Couldn't you stay awake for 1 hour? Stay awake and pray so that you won't enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And we've all been there. I am there every day when we talk about the flesh is weak. There every day. And God, you see, has patience. Even though they can't even stay awake to pray. And here's what they're missing. They don't even really truly know what's about to happen. They don't know what's about to happen. And he's been telling them, but they hadn't been catching on. And then on top of that, he says in here, stay awake and pray so that you won't enter into temptation. Temptation's not sin, but it is an invitation to sin. And so he's trying to teach them, and they're not catching on. He's trying to even teach them right now, you need to be praying and building that relationship closer. So when the time comes and temptation comes, you'll be ready and prepared. We all know when we're getting ready to do something, we prepare for it. And Christ is trying to tell them right now, I'm trying to show you, you need to prepare what's about to come so you can prepare yourself. When we get bombarded with a situation that we haven't had to handle before, and we have to act real fast, then we're probably going to do it out of haste because we didn't have time to prepare for it. We didn't know. I mean, if somebody comes at you just hollering and screaming, the first reaction is you want to holler and scream back. And what Christ is saying is, if we prepare daily by keeping our relationship close to him, when those temptations come, we'll be better prepared for it so we don't act out like Peter's going to act out here shortly by cutting the guy's ear off. You think Christ want to do that? No, but that's why he's telling them you need to prepare, but they just don't catch on to it. But everything we do in life is about that. If we act out of obedience and we stay close to Christ, then when those situations arise, then we're better equipped to handle them in a way, in a Christ-like way, so that we may even bring someone closer to him. But the only way to do that is to stay close to him. And the only way to stay close to him is to read his word and meditate with him. And when I say meditate, I mean you got to be by yourself. I can go down the road, and I can pray somewhat or whatever, but I get my best meditation is when I'm by myself outside and I get away from everybody. And I take that cell phone and leave it in the house or cut it off. Because as soon as you don't, you start trying to do that, phone ring, just like that. Every time, phone ring. Sometimes I think that's Satan doing that, trying to mess up my meditation. And then sometimes I think it's just coincidence of what's going on with people. But there's a purpose behind everything that goes on in our life. Every situation we in, everything that we do, everywhere we find ourselves, there is a purpose. And it's all part of building his kingdom, and it's all part of him working through us, but we've got to act out of obedience. Because if we don't, then we're going to miss what he wants for us. Because he rewards his children. It plainly says in the Bible, he rewards his children. But we got to do it out of obedience. I can remember when Jay and Abby, they only got 2 spankings in their whole life. All right. One, let me tell you this. I just remember this. So one time the neighbor comes to me and says, someone shot out my window with a BB gun. And someone also painted a smiley face. I'm talking about a smiley face as big as that screen on the back of his barn. And he said, I believe it's your son. And I said, sir, I am not as naive to say it wasn't him. But please let me check on it first before we accuse him. He said, yeah, I'm fine with that. I said, okay. So on the way to church one morning, I let it go for like a week. Jay's sitting in the back seat. We go to pulling out, and I stopped by that man's barn. I said, well, look at there. Looks like somebody done shot his window out. I said, you know anything about that, Jay? And I looked up in the rearview mirror, and he said, he hesitated. That's all I needed to know. I said, you've got to be kidding me. Well, listen, Dad, listen, nothing. I was defending you. Why did you paint a smiley face on the back of his barn? He said, I don't know. He just didn't have nothing else to do, so he thought he'd do that. And we were talking about it during Thanksgiving, and my dad asked him the same thing. Why'd you paint a smiley face on the guy's barn? He said, I don't know. We just didn't have nothing to do. Now, he's 28 years old now, but even then, he didn't know why he did it, but it's disobedience. It was rebellion. He didn't have nothing to do. Who knows? But I could have acted a different way with that neighbor, and that wouldn't have been good. But I was very nice and cordial, and then, of course, me and the neighbor took care of his window and sent Jay over there to repaint his barn. So there's consequences to our disobedience. Now let's look at verse 40. And again he came and found them sleeping. So now they done fell asleep again. And because they could not keep their eyes open, they did not know what to say to him. Then he came a third time and said to him, are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The time has come, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let's go. See, my betrayer is near. So in closing, I didn't even realize we done went past our time. In closing, what I'd like to say is, first of all, everything we do, there's a purpose behind it. And if we're obedient, Christ will take us further than we ever think we'll ever go. And he'll put you in situations, and it may be uncomfortable, but when you get through it, you're going to be a better person. You're going to be a stronger person. And you're also going to be able to pass that down to someone else. And you're probably going to plant more and more seeds than you ever thought you would, just by your actions, because we all know words are cheap. And so what does obedience do for us? I'd rather ask the question is what does it not do for us? It does everything for us. Being obedient to Christ, it does everything. What does obedience mean? In simple terms, it means hearing the word of God and acting upon it. That's what it means. Colossians 3:20 says, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. 1 John 2:5-6 says, but if anyone obeys his word, God's love is truly made complete in him. This is how we know we are in him. Whoever claims to live in him must walk as Jesus did. 1 John 5:3 says, this is love for God, to obey his commands. And that's what he wants. He don't want to make us do it. He wants us to do it on our own. And then we glorify him during the process. And then throughout the whole process and through our life's journey, as long as we can stay humble and act out of obedience. Don't get me wrong, we're all going to fail every day. But as long as we're trying and pushing towards that direction, he's going to take us further than we thought we'd ever go. He's going to put us in situations we thought we'd ever be in. And no matter the problems that come our way, we'll have a peace that passes all understanding, no matter what's going on in our life. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for another day of life, and we thank you for your many blessings. We thank you for your mercy, your love, and your compassion. And we thank you for everything that you do for us on a daily basis, even if we don't recognize it. And all these things we ask in your name. Amen.